Ready to dive into a case that really highlights the drama of big business in India.
I'm all ears, always up for a good legal saga, especially when it involves a power struggle.
And this one has it all. We're talking massive loans, a stalled power plant, and the Supreme Court stepping in to decide who blinks first.
Sounds juicy. Let's hear it.
All right, buckle up, because we're unpacking Vidarbha Industries Power Ltd versus Axis Bank.
Okay, VIPL versus Axis Bank. Got it. So, what's the backdrop here? What were these guys fighting over?
Picture this VIPL. They had this grand vision, a huge thermal power plant in Maharashtra.
Ambitious. But those big projects, they don't come cheap, do they?
Not even close. We're talking about a project estimated at a whopping worth 6,000 crore.
Okay, that's a whole lot of crores. No wonder they needed a major bank on their side.
Exactly. Enter Axis Bank. They become the lead lender in this consortium, putting up serious cash to make VIPL's power plant dream a reality.
Big risks, potentially big rewards.
Yeah,
I bet they thought they were backing a winner.
right. India is always hungry for power. A project like this, it's a win-win, or so they thought.
Okay, so we have got VIPL, the ambitious company. We've got Axis Bank backing them with a mountain of cash. What went wrong?
Well, like with many big projects in India, things got complicated. We're talking about the usual suspects, bureaucratic hurdles, environmental clearances, land acquisition, the works.
Ah, the classic Indian business obstacles. Those delays alone can throw a wrench in the gears, let alone a project of this scale.
Precisely. And as those delays mounted, the costs, they just kept piling up.
Uh-oh, I'm sensing trouble in paradise. So VIPL starts falling behind on their loan repayments to Axis Bank.
You got it. And that, my friend, is where the real legal battle begins.
Because Axis Bank, they're not just going to sit back and watch their investment go up in smoke, are they?
Not a chance. They had a lot on the line, and they weren't afraid to use the legal system to protect their interests.
This is where the IBC comes in, right? The Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code.
Bingo. And this is where things get really interesting.
Because the IBC, it's a powerful tool. It was brought in to make sure that when businesses in India go belly up, things get sorted out quickly and fairly. No more dragging things out for years in court.
Exactly. But this case, it really tested the limits of the IBC and forced everyone to think, well, what happens when a company stumbles but isn't quite out of the game?
Yeah, it's one thing if a company's beyond saving, but what if there's a chance they could still turn things around?
Okay, so picture this. Axis Bank, they're looking at those missed payments. They're getting antsy. They decide to play their trump card. They invoke the IBC to initiate insolvency proceedings against VIPL.
A bold move. But VIPL, I'm guessing, they weren't going down without a fight.
Oh, absolutely not. They came back swinging. They argued that this wasn't a case of a company down for the count. They said, hold on, we're this close to getting those final approvals, the project can still be salvaged. Liquidating the company, they insisted, would be a disaster for everyone, even for Axis Bank in the long run.
Okay, I see their point. It's a tough one. I mean, you have to give credit to Axis Bank for trying to protect their investment. But at the same time, you don't want to completely kill off a company that might just need a bit of breathing room to get back on track, especially with a project as important as a power plant.
Yeah.
So who did the court side with?
Well, this is where things get really fascinating. Remember the National Company Law Tribunal, the NCLT? They're the ones who handle these IBC cases.
Right, they're the specialists in this area, not just your everyday court.
Exactly. So the NCLT had to make a call. Do they let Axis Bank proceed with insolvency, potentially pushing VIPL into liquidation, or do they hit pause, give them a chance to get back on their feet and finish the project?
A pivotal moment for sure.
Yeah.
It's like they were holding VIPL's fate in their hands. Can't wait to hear what happened next.
So you're right. It was a nail-biter. Everyone's watching the NCLT, waiting to see which way they'll jump.
Because their decision, it's not just about VIPL and Axis Bank, is it? It sets a precedent.
Absolutely. It could change how the IBC is used, how these kinds of cases play out in the future. It's high stakes all around.
So what did the NCLT do? Did they side with the lender or the borrower?
Well, get this. Their decision, it surprised everyone.
Oh, they went off script. I like where this is going.
Right. So the NCLT, they actually sided with VIPL.
Whoa, hold on. They said no to the insolvency even though there were missed payments? How is that even possible under the IBC?
That's the thing. The IBC, it's not as clear-cut as it might seem. It's open to interpretation. And the NCLT, they used that wiggle room.
Interesting. So it's not just about whether a company defaults. There's more to it than that.
Way more. The NCLT, they basically said, look, we get it. Axis Bank's concerned. They want their money. But completely shutting down VIPL, it might not be the best solution here.
It's like they were saying, let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater.
Oh, right.
Right, especially with a power plant project that could benefit so many people if it actually gets up and running.
Exactly. The NCLT recognized that sometimes a company might hit a rough patch, face unexpected delays, things beyond their control, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're a lost cause.
So, in a way, the NCLT's decision, it injects a dose of realism into the IBC, right?
Because in the real world, business, it's messy, it's complicated, things don't always go according to plan, and sometimes companies need a little breathing room to get back on track.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I bet. Because if the NCLT can hit the brakes on insolvency, what's stopping every struggling company from claiming they just need a little more time?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And this is where the Supreme Court steps in. They saw this case, this decision by the NCLT, and they realized, okay, we need to clear some things up. We need to provide some guidelines on how this IBC thing is supposed to work.
Because if they didn't step in, it could have thrown the whole system into chaos, right? Lenders wouldn't know what to expect. Borrowers might start making excuses. It could have been a mess.
And that's exactly what the Supreme Court wanted to avoid. They knew they had to strike a balance, they had to protect the rights of lenders to get their money back, but also create a system that didn't punish companies for facing temporary setbacks.
So they took the case, the big leagues, the highest court in the land. Everyone's watching, waiting to see how they rule, what they say.
Yeah.
No pressure.
So everyone's on the edge of their seats, right? What's the Supreme Court going to do? This is it. The final word on this whole VIPL versus Axis Bank saga.
Yeah, and the Supreme Court, they didn't disappoint. Their ruling, it sent shockwaves through the whole business world here in India.
Because they basically said, you know what, the NCLT, they were right to hit the pause button on insolvency. They agreed that pushing a company under just because of missed payments, it's not always the best move.
Wow, so they backed the NCLT's decision all the way. That's a pretty big deal for companies, right? Means they've got a bit more leeway if they run into trouble.
Exactly. The Supreme Court, they basically said that forcing a company into insolvency, it should be a last resort, not the first thing you jump to when things get a little rough.
Makes sense, because if you think about it, sometimes companies just need a little breathing room, right? Time to sort out problems, get back on their feet.
Absolutely. The Supreme Court recognized that, and they said that the NCLT, they have the power to consider all of that. It's not just about ticking boxes, missed a payment, okay, you're out. It's about looking at the bigger picture.
So it's a win for businesses then. They get a bit more security, a chance to recover from a bad patch.
In a way, yes. But, and this is a big but, the Supreme Court also made it clear that this power the NCLT has, it's not a free pass for companies to just dodge their debts.
Okay, so there are some ground rules. What do they say? What are the conditions?
The Supreme Court laid down some pretty specific guidelines. They said the NCLT has to consider a whole bunch of factors before they hit pause on insolvency.
Like what? Give me some examples.
Well, for starters, they have to look at whether the company is actually viable. You know, do they have a solid plan for the future? Is there a chance they can actually turn things around and pay back their debts?
Makes sense. No point giving a company a second chance if they're just going to crash and burn again in a few months.
Right. They also said the NCLT has to look at why the company defaulted in the first place. Were they being irresponsible, or were there external factors, things beyond their control, that led to the missed payments?
Yeah, like those classic Indian business obstacles we talked about earlier, bureaucracy gone wild, those kinds of things.
Exactly. And then they said the NCLT also needs to consider what happens to everyone involved if the company does go under. What about the employees? What about other businesses they work with?
So it's a balancing act, right? Trying to find a solution that's fair to everyone involved, lenders and borrowers, but also taking into account the wider impact on the economy.
Exactly, and that's what makes this decision so significant. It sets a precedent. It changes how we think about insolvency in India. It's not just about punishment anymore. It's about finding solutions.
It sounds like a step in the right direction. It gives companies a fighting chance, but it also keeps them accountable.
Absolutely. It's a delicate balance, but this case, this whole VIPL versus Axis Bank showdown, it's really forced everyone to rethink how we approach insolvency and how we support businesses in India. So there you have it. A deep dive into one of the most talked about legal cases in recent Indian history. It's a story of ambition, risk, and the high-stakes world of big business. But more than that, it's a case that highlights the evolving landscape of Indian law and the constant search for that elusive balance between protecting investors and fostering economic growth. We hope you enjoyed this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating case, another opportunity to unravel the complexities of India's legal and business landscape.
Always a pleasure to dig into these cases. Until next time.